Yeah, hello. So this is me, and I'm just giving a little bit of an introduction about myself, so you get to know me before I actually start telling you about Blender. So this is me, and I'm 14. I'm turning 15 soon, and I'm in 10th grade, and I live in Jaipur. So like right now, I'm not an expert in animation or 3D modeling because it's not one of my primary skills. But I still wanted to teach it because I thought it was a fun skill to learn. So this is a few these are a few of my skills that I things that I know, graphic designing, and these are a few programming languages and a little bit of robotics, a little bit of app development, some basic game development and web development, and a little bit of ethical hacking. These are a few of my hobbies. I love coding, physics, maths, playing the guitar, drawing, sketching, reading, football. So this is what I actually want to do in life. I want to go to MIT for my graduation. I plan to get a master's in computer science and a PhD in physics. I want to get into research and development later. So these are a few of my achievements. I wrote them down. Move on. Okay. So these are three basic models I made. These are called low poly models because they are not very well detailed, but that is on intention because they have a little bit of vertices and edges because like it gives a nice look to it, and it's like basically a good start for beginners. These are a few low poly models. Let's start with what Blender is. Blender is a free and open source 3D creation suite. It supports the entirety of the 3D pipeline: modeling, rigging, animation, simulation, rendering, compositing, and motion tracking, video editing, and 2D animation pipeline. So I've used Blender a lot, and it is a really great tool for 3D modeling and all the stuff that you can do with a 3D software. It has all the kinds of tools. It is also good for 2D animation. I've not used 2D animation very much, but it has pretty good tools for everything. So starting getting comfortable with the environment. So basically, to navigate around Blender, you need the numpad arrow keys. It all comes down to numpad arrow keys because you rotate the view with it, you get around the view with it. So if you hold down control with the numpad arrow keys, you can actually shift your view, and you need to shift your view a couple times when you work in Blender. And also, this is not really used too much, but you can hold shift to rotate your view. So it will actually rotate it clockwise or anti-clockwise. So you can hold down control, and you can use the plus and minus keys to zoom in and out. This is pretty common. And on the top right corner, there are a number of elements. So you can see a scene collection file here, and there are some files inside of it. So these are all your 3D objects organized into files. So these act pretty much like normal files, but these are 3D objects. You can see the cube here. The camera and the light are not visible in the scene, but they are there. So these are all the files you can organize. You can put more files into it. You can organize it all, and you can rename them just like normal files, move them, duplicate them. So now on the toolbar on the left is a set of tools you can access and edit. So now you see some tools here. These are just like in Photoshop. These are tools you can use to edit your objects, all kinds of objects. And you can also change view mode to wireframe or rendered for different purposes. You can see 4 view modes here. So we're in the solid one right now. There are 2 types of render modes, and there is a wireframe mode. So the wireframe mode, you don't really see the faces, you only see the edges and the vertices. So how it works is it's like the faces go transparent, so you can see through your model, you can see the mesh, and you can actually see if you have extra edges or vertices in your object. You don't really want them, so you can remove them. And rendered is actually used for what your final outcome will be. When you add color and all, you don't really see it in the object mode. Okay. Coming down to some basic shortcuts. Shortcuts are really, really important when in Blender because everything comes down to shortcuts. Like you know what you want to do, but then it is a lot faster when you know the shortcuts. Like if you try to use these tools, then it will be a lot slower. So you need to know some basic shortcuts so you can get started with it. So you need to know how to add an object. So to add an object, it's just shift and A. So you see a 3D cursor right here. It's by default, it's on the origin of the graph, on the 3D graph. So You can move it anywhere, but whenever you add something to the scene, it generally adds wherever the 3D cursor is. Now there are three types of you can do. What do we call them? You can move, you can resize, and you can rotate. So you can do these two. You can perform these on any type of objects, but you can add some constraints to it so they are precise. So when you want to do these manipulations, what you actually do is you just select them, and then these are the shortcuts G, S, and R key. So you use the shortcut, and then to add constraints. Now, what constraints actually are is you actually you lock it to an axis or use some kind of constraint, and then it obeys it. It can't go further than that. So when you lock it to an axis, suppose I lock face to an x-axis, so it will not be able to move in the y or the z-axis, and it will only be able to move in the x-axis. I'll show you soon enough. And you can also lock it to all axis but one by clicking shift and then add the axis letter. So to add a constraint, you just like when you move it, you press G. But when you want to lock it to the x-axis, you also press X with it. So it will actually lock to the x-axis. And to lock in all axis but one, you will press shift X, so it will lock to the Y and Z axis. You can also add a quantity constraint. So what it does is, if you want to move in an axis and you press 2, so it will move 2 blocks, whatever unit you are using in your software. And you can also use it for size. It will increase to 2 times the size. Okay, so switching to edit mode. Now this is important. When you're in object mode, there are only you can only actually access the objects. You cannot really change the objects. But when you want to change the object shapes, you have to go into edit mode. So you can change the positions of vertices and edges, and you can manipulate your object in other ways. So you have to go to edit mode. So you press tab. And you have to select the object for that, because if you don't select the object, then the software doesn't really know which object you want to edit right now. So now rotating view using trackpad. So when you want to move in the view using your trackpad, not with the num keys, you can use you can use shift and then the back tick key. So you can fly around in this whole graph, and then you can duplicate using shift plus T. For this also you have to select the object because it doesn't know then which object you want to duplicate. So you have to select an object and you can press shift T and it duplicates. Now to delete an object, it's really easy. You just press X and it gives you a prompt if you really want to delete it, and then you can press enter. It's really easy to delete an object. To select all, like when you have selected an object already, you can just press A and it will select all the objects in the scene. Or if you are in edit mode, it will select all the vertices in the scene, in the object actually. When you want to invert your selection. Now, inverting selection is whatever you have selected, that will get deselected, and whatever you've not selected, that will get selected. So you can just use Control I and it will invert the selection. Now, the hide. Hide is to, move something out of your way for a few minutes or a few hours when you want to work on something else. So you can just press H, you can select an object and you can hide it by pressing H. And when you want to show all the hidden items, you can just press Alt H and all these hidden items will show up. Now, when you're moving something or you're resizing something or you're rotating something, these basic manipulations, whenever you're using, so you'll make mistakes sometimes. Like everyone does that. So whenever you've made a mistake, you don't actually confirm it by left clicking. You press escape and it'll stop whatever it is doing immediately. So this is also a little important. Now, these are some common shortcuts that everyone already uses, just the Blender version of them. Like cut and redo is actually a little different. You use Shift Control Z, but all the others are practically the same. So we use Control Z for copy, Control V for paste, Control Z for undo, Control X for cut. Now, in edit mode, when you're in edit mode, there will be 3 types of modes you can edit in. Either you want to select vertices, or you want to select edges, or you want to select faces, because like there are different kinds of manipulation for all the types of edit modes you have. And so you have to press 1, 2, and 3 in edit mode to actually switch to vertex, edge, or face mode. To selection, multiple select is used by shift and click. So what you actually do is you select one object and then you click shift, you hold down shift, and then you click all the other objects you want to select at the same time. Select from active. What an active selection is, it will be highlighted in light yellow, and all the other selections will be highlighted in dark yellow. So an active selection is the most recent selection. So some type of manipulations only work on active selection. So this is important. And select from active selection to another point. So when you're at a vertex, suppose you're on this vertex and you want to select from this vertex to that vertex, the shortest route from the shortest route. So you'll click this vertex and you'll click that with holding down control. So what it'll do is it'll take the shortest path. In this case, it will be this one, and it'll select everything in between. So in complex objects, this is really important to select loops and rings and all. Okay, so row select. Okay, row select is also important. When you what you do is, like, there is a row of edges right now on the top. You can see it. So a row doesn't have to be in a two-dimensional flat surface. It can be like it is right now. It is in a loop. So this is a row of edges on the top when you see a face. So if you click or hold down Alt and you select one edge, it will select every edge in this row. So this will be used right now in the project we'll do later. And for other selection methods, use the select drop-down menu. There is a select drop-down menu right here, uh, and then you can use a lot of other features in it, like checker select and all. You'll learn about that, making a little more complex shapes. Now, this is the interesting part. What you actually do is you take the basic shapes like the cube, the UV sphere, and other basic 3D shapes, and you manipulate them to make shapes that you want, because all the shapes are not defined. And obviously, whatever you want to make in the 3D software is not predefined. So you'll have to manipulate objects to actually make it. So you use the predefined cube mostly, and you manipulate it to make this house kind of thingy right now. It's not fully a house, but like you can manipulate it to make this. The toolbar on the left can be used to create loop cuts or extrude. Okay, so loop cuts and extrude are two types of manipulations that you can use. A loop cut, what the loop cut does it makes another edge loop in between two edge loops. So right now there is an edge loop here and an edge loop opposite to it. So you can make a loop cut between them. So what it does, it will create an extra edge and you can place it wherever you want. And then like the door is right now the door is made using loop cuts, and I've merged them later. And then the extrude. So what an extrude does, it creates an extra instance of a face. Like when you extrude a face or an edge or a vertex, it will create an extra instance of it. It will duplicate it and connect it to the original one. So this garage you see right now close to the house, it is an extruded version. And then this space in the garage is also an extruded version that I've taken inside. So using edit mode, you can change positions of vertices and edges. So in edit mode, you'll use the same functions, the move and the resize and the rotate, using edges and vertex and faces. So it works the same ways with objects and with vertex and edges. So while moving something, you can add axis constraints. So in vertexes and edges also, you can add axis constraints just like we were doing with objects. And you can use loopers, extrude, edit faces, edges. You can make far more complex shapes. Okay, so this is a far more complex shape than a cube. Okay, so this is only possible with loop cuts and extrudes. You cannot do it with using too many objects. It will not work with this. Resolving faces help in simplifying the mesh. Okay, now getting to the mesh. So what a mesh is the vertices and edges, how they actually connect to each other. That is called the mesh. So when you want to simplify the mesh, you'll obviously want to simplify the mesh when you'll be working on larger projects, because then you'll have to manipulate a lot of objects and you'll have to use a lot of objects a lot of times. Like when you make grass, so you want to make one instance of grass and then you want to duplicate it all over the field. So for that, you need a very simple mesh, because if it will be complicated, then a single mistake you'll have to then solve it in all of the instances of the grass. So to simplify the mesh, it's really easy. You just have to dissolve all the extra faces. Like if I have created loop cuts, it will create extra faces. So in the end, I just have to dissolve all the faces and create it into one face using all the. Okay, so now there's some basic tools and their shortcuts, how we actually use the tools. This is a loop cut. I already talked about it. This is how it looks in the software. This is the default position of the loop cut. You can actually move it anywhere. And this is the extrude version of it. He has extruded it and then he has resized it and then he has extruded it again. So it's really simple to how you can do so many complex things using extrude. This is the inset. So for inset, you need to have a row of faces, and then you can insert it. Like you can see right now, it has been inset. So inset is also like extrude and resizing, but it is kind of different for some purposes. But right now you can also use extrude and resize for the same purpose. What bevel does is it'll add extra edges and actually give it a more rounded edge. So you'll not actually have a really sharp edge and it will not look as hostile. So to make it look more simple and welcoming and warm, your mesh, it needs to have a curved surface. Even if it's like a table, you need to add some bevel to it. Maybe it may be really subtle and simple. Okay, so moving on to the knife. So what the knife does is it takes the midpoints of edges and you can make cuts through the midpoints of edges. You can make complex cuts that you cannot make using loop cuts and other things. So the knife is also really useful when you're trying to do something really different. Then comes the spin. This is useful for things like glass or a bowling pin. I showed you a bowling pin on the top of the presentation. So what we do is we make a single line of vertex or a single plane, and then we rotate it 360 degrees to make this kind of shape. Rotate is actually we use spin. So it is really useful. We can later we can just clamp it together, and then it makes it a single object. So this can be used for things that are like same all around, making other improvements and adding color. Okay. So this roof, I have not added an extra shape, and you could have added an extra pyramid in it, but I don't really prefer it because when you add two or more objects to the same object, so what it does it will create separate objects. So when you're trying to move an object, the second instance of the object will actually stay at the same place. It is important to get rid of overlapping unwanted vertices and keeping it as simple as possible. Why I'm saying this is because when you create a scenery, you need to move things, you need to manipulate things in other ways. So when you do that, the extra vertices and the extra edges really bug you. So you should get rid of them as soon as you can. There are many ways you can render the output. Okay. So, okay, before that, I'll come to the materials. You need to create materials, edit properties, and assign to specific parts of the model. So what you do is there is a material tab over here you can reach, and then you can create a color material, and then you can add it to specific sets of vertices and faces and edges. So what it does, I have added the brown color to a few faces, I've added the gray color to a few faces, and I've added the orange color to a few faces. And then there is a dark gray also. So these are all different materials I've created. I've assigned them the properties. Right now I've assigned them simple colors. You can assign a lot of things to them, and uh, I actually implemented them. So it just adds the color. Right now I'm in render mode, so it actually gives it an emulated environment. But when the second render mode is used, it actually gives the environment that you have created. Right now, we'll not learn how to create an environment that is separate, that is really complicated. But right now, we can actually just view it in the emulated environment. It keeps it lit from everywhere. Okay, so now once I'll take you to the top again, I'll show you the projects I made. Okay. So this bowling pin was actually just a set of vertices that I created here, and then I spun it around, and then I added color to it. I showed you how the house was made, and the lightsaber, I just actually extruded it and gave it some bevel, and then I gave this red color some emission, so it actually adds some glow to it. Now we'll just hop into Blender and I'll show you this simple lightsaber project. Let me stop sharing. Okay. So, I hope you can see my screen. Okay, we're creating a new file. So now I'm using the numpad keys to navigate through it. This is what Blender looks like when you hop into it. And this is the default cube you get. So what we want to do is, generally we just delete the cube because we don't need it. And I want to show you how we add objects. So I'm going to delete it. I use X and then enter. As simple as that. Then use Shift A to add an object. We add a cube. Okay. So what we do now is we hop into edit mode because what will okay, right now we'll not be using the cube because we have to make the light shape. So I'll add. Okay, there are many types of objects you can add. There is a plane, there's a cube, circle, UV sphere, icosphere, cylinder, cone, torus. So a torus is a donut-like shape. The others you may know. Okay, this is the circle. Now to circle, what I can do is because I want to make it low poly, I don't want to add too much edges to complicate it. I'll just give it 16 edges, 16 vertices. So the number of vertices equals the number of edges. So right now, you can just take this drop down menu, drop up menu, and you can give it 16 vertices. So you can see I have reduced the number of vertices. If I drop it down to it, you can see it even clearer. It has gotten less edges. I'll just show you. Okay. So right now we need 16 and we have created this into a mesh. Now we'll hop into edit mode. Now there are three types of modes I told you. This is the vertex mode. When I press 2, it goes into edge mode, and when I press 3, it goes into face mode. Right now we don't have a face, so it doesn't show anything. So what we need right now is the vertex mode, and we'll select all by pressing A. Like I told you, the shortcuts make it really fast. So now I'll just minimize and zoom out a little, and then I'll extrude it. So what happens when I extrude it, I get the free will to take it anywhere I want, but I don't want to do that. I want to add constraints to make it precise. Like if I actually try and to make it precise, and then I go into Z axis, you can see it's pretty out of line. So what we actually do is we select all, extrude, and then we add a constraint. So I press C, so it's locked onto the Z axis, as you can see. So we'll just extrude it this much. And now to make a handle, I want it to go a little bit on the inside. So what I'll do is I'll extrude it on the Z axis again. And then now it's on the same plane. So when you size it, it'll size on the same plane. But generally, if there is a 3D object and you want to size it on a same plane, so you'll lock the other two axes than the one don't want to. So I'll press Shift Z, and now it's only resizing on the X and Y axis. It was doing that anyways because this is a plane object, but I'm just telling you for future. So this is what I've done right now, and shift view a little bit. Dot. Now we'll extrude on the Z axis again. So this looks pretty decent as a handle, but what I want to do is I want to add a bevel to it because it looks pretty sharp right now. If you hop out of edit mode, you can see that it has given a pretty sharp edge to it. These edges were intended because it's low poly, but I don't want these edges to be as sharp. So I'll go into edit mode again. I'll press 2 for edge, and then I'll take this edge loop. So now what I want to do is to give it a curve, Control P is used for bevel. So what it does right now is it gives it only one extra face. So if I confirm it at this much, I can give it extra segments. So if I select 5, for example, so it is given it 5 faces. So it's given it a more rounded, nice look. And you can see this looks pretty nice. So now we select the edge again, Alt select, and then we extrude it on the Z axis a little bit. And then we want to resize it a little bit. Okay, so I don't have an exact idea of how lightsaber looks, so I've made my own version of what I make in Blender. So we want to fill this portion. So this is a really common thing you should know. This is not, uh, most people don't know about this, but this is really useful. So you should, when you select an edge and you want to fill it, so you just press F and then it fills it with a face. This is pretty useful. You should know this, and I'll come back to this. So when I'm selecting this edge loop and extruding it again on the Z axis, now you can see this looks like a handle now, a little bit like a handle, but it still has a sharp edge. So what I'll do again, select this edge loop and then I'll give it some bevel. So now our previous settings have been used in this, but maybe I want to give it some less segments, so I can just change the number of segments. It's really easy, and if you have any questions, I'll take them at the end. Okay. So now from the top, it's still hollow because in Blender, you don't actually uh, You don't actually get a solid shape when you're making it. It's just the outside portion of it. So when you want to make it look like it's full, so you want to cover it from all sides. So right now what we'll be doing is we'll be extruding and we'll be resizing it. So what this does is it does the same as inset, but inset doesn't really work on edges. It works on faces. So you should probably use extrude for this purpose. And it has actually created a new face and resized it, but it looks like it has been inset. So this works pretty well. Now I don't want to size it this much, so I can resize it again. And now these are the views you can hop into if you really want to see from a specific view. So this is, I'm seeing it from the Z-axis. I can see it from the X-axis. And this is the Y-axis. Now, if I want to see it from the other side, I just press on the axis I'm right now and it flips it to the other side. Okay. Popping back into view using the numpad keys. And so what I want to do is I want to take it a little bit on the inside, and then I want the lightsaber to come from the inside. It should come out from the inside, not from right now where it is, because that will not look as nice. So I'll take it to the Z-axis below, and then I want to give it another curve on the inside. So, excuse me. Yeah. So I'll extrude it again on the Z-axis and I will resize it, because then I can give it bevel and it will look like curve. So I don't want to resize it too much. It just should size a little bit, and then alt, and then we'll select this edge loop. Now Control B, and we can give it some more bevel. See, this looks pretty decent. And we can take the last one, which we want our lightsaber to come out of. So now what we'll do is we'll extrude it, simple as that. And we can extrude it a little bit right now. So what you want to do is, if you've not extruded as much as you want, you can just hop into front view, and you don't need to extrude again. If you want it to go further, you can just move it on the Z axis, where you don't need to extrude again if you've extruded it once. So I'll just resize it a little bit. See, do they do the job? So now I wanted to extrude again because I want to add a curve on the top also, and I wanted to merge into a vertex. So I'll show that to you also. So it's locked onto the Z axis right now. Sized it a little bit. Extrude it on the Z axis again. And now what I want to do is I want to hop into edit mode again. And then I'll take the vertex loop, and then I want to merge it. So what you do to merge a circle or any type of shape, all the vertices you have selected, want to merge in the center. Now there are a lot of types you can merge in. So you just press M, and then there are three options. You can merge at center, at cursor, or you can just collapse. So right now what we'll be using is at center. So it has created a point. I can move it a little bit. It look good. And I'll hop into edit mode, and I want to give it some bevel because I want it to look curved. So Control B. Okay. So now it looks pretty much like a lightsaber, but we still have a problem. It doesn't have any color. So right now here you can see a list of a lot of things you can do. So what we want to do is we want to go into the material, and in the material we'll add a new material because we don't have a material already, and we'll create a material. And actually we can use the default material for the first one, and we can change it. So this is the material I'll be using for the handle. So I want it to be a little grayish. Okay, I think they should do. And wait a second, I can give it a little more. Okay, so you just hop into edit mode, you select all right now, and I've assigned it. Okay, right now you can't see the color because we're in object mode. So what we'll do is we'll go into render. We can go into the second option also, but we'll not be able to see everything because we don't have light source, proper light source to see it. So right now we're in the emulated environment, and so now to give two different materials to a single object, you need to add another material. And here we can use the new material we created, and this will be the lightsaber material. So we can actually rename it. Okay. So I've renamed it to lightsaber color, and we want it to be red. Okay. So now to assign it, we'll go into edit mode. We'll go into face mode, because when you assign a color to edges, it doesn't really work because an edge can't have a color. Practically, it doesn't really exist in a 3D world. So we can now, as I showed you, we hold Alt to actually select a loop of edges. So if we hold on Alt on a face, we can select a loop of faces, and then I can now I'll show you a very good use for wireframe. If we switch it to wireframe right now, so I can just select everything. Okay, go on to y-axis, and I can box all of it. Okay, I think it's all selected. Yeah. So now we can go back into rendered, and we can select the lightsaber color and we can assign it. So now you can see the difference. We've got a red color, but we still have a problem. It doesn't glow yet. Okay. So I'll get it in the center of my view. And this is pretty easy. It'll be very simple. You'll be shocked how simple it is. So what you do is you switch the emission color to preferably the color you've already used, and then you can change the emission strength. Okay, so you can see I've added, it has already added some glow to itself. Now, if I keep it at 10, now it's not pretty much impressive, so I'll add it. Okay. Now, you can't really see the difference yet because it just looks lighter. So that's because we haven't enabled bloom. So this is the render settings which I talked about. So you can render in EV and cycles and all, but the right now what we need is we need bloom. So now you can see the glow in it. Okay, so we go back into the materials. This is the material we've used for a handle. So we should rename it to handle. Okay, I'd advise you to rename everything you have made at the end of the project, so you don't get confused when you leave and you come back to visit your project. So you don't get confused what property, what thing, everything is. So okay, so now I can change the emission a little bit because I think the glow is too much. Okay, so this looks decent. This looks like a lightsaber. So I'll just talk about, a little about the render settings, and I'll take the questions after that. So for the render settings, this is the sampling. So there are two render engines, EV and cycles. Workbench isn't really good for rendering. So in EV, what it does, it doesn't take the reflections and the refractions into account. But what cycles does, it makes it as realistic as possible. It records every possible light, where light can strike and it can bounce back. So it makes it a lot more realistic, but it takes a lot more time. So when you actually go to see animated movies, but you'll be wondering what type of render engine they use. So they actually use both. So when you actually use ambient occlusion and other settings, you can actually make EV also look pretty good. But the difference is cycles is much more realistic. So for fluid animations and other animations that need to look realistic, the the animation companies, they generally use cycles. But for mostly scenes which have objects in them, they don't really need to look realistic, so they'll be using EV. Okay, so after that, you can actually ambient occlusion is used for mirrors and things like that, where you actually need a reflective surface. Depth of field is actually the camera settings you'll need when you actually record it or actually need to render out an image or a video. Now, subsurface scattering, this is another thing. Now, you have a surface right now, so we don't have a subsurface in it right now, but you can add a subsurface like when our skin looks red, it's not actually, skin is not actually that color. The red tint it gets is from the blood beneath. So that is called subsurface scattering. So when you want something to look a lot more realistic, like it's usually used for human skin only. That was the best example I had. But there are a lot more things you can use subsurface scattering for, and it is basically you have another surface beneath your surface, and your surface is really thin. So the light scattering will also be performed by the surface beneath. Okay, screen space reflections is also used for mirrors and motion blur, volumetrics. Okay, you have a lot more things here, the hair, the shadows. And shadow settings are generally nice in Blender, but you can change them if you really want to. And you can finally render it out. You have a render window here. You can render an image or you can render an animation however you like it. Okay. So that's all I'll be teaching for now.
Atik, I gotta say this was super dope, especially when that lightsaber blew up. I felt it.
Thanks a lot.
And I'm also surprised you said this wasn't one of your top skills. It kind of seems that you know this in and out.
Yeah.
It was super cool to see.
Well, I gave it a
Yeah,
few months, not one of my top skills, but I gave it a few months.
nice. That's great. So one of the questions that I had, and Arnav, others feel free to take a few questions too. But I'm curious, I've never used Blender before, but does Blender allow you to create like 3D printable models?
Yeah, exactly. That was like a question I had when I started learning Blender, and I found out yes, you can actually convert any type of 3D object into an object that you can print into. You can actually use to print a 3D object. So you can use Blender files to create 3D printed objects.
That's awesome. And can you do like animations as well? Can you like if you
Yeah.
wanted, could you like add a button to the lightsaber that when you press the button, like the thing comes up like it does?
Okay, so for that, what you need to do is you need to add another property which will actually make it glow up, and you have to time like because in an animation it will not really work like a circuit. Like when you press a button, it will glow up. But what you can do is you can take the timings because when the button will be pressed, you'll have to animate it to be pressed. So you'll also have to animate it to glow. You can change the color using animation. You can do a lot of things using animation.
Sweet. That's all my questions. Arnav, others, I don't know if you guys had more or any.
So
Yeah,
anyone have?
I have one.
Yeah, sure.
Like just the same like that Akshat asked that yeah, if I want to make a project for a science club or something and I want to make it a 3D model in which I have to express a whole city,
Yeah.
so will it be possible that we can show everything going around like cars moving with
Yeah,
Blender,
exactly.
like
So for that, you need to either animate your object to rotate or you need to animate your camera. So for animation, you actually use keyframing. So what it does, it actually, you have to make a path for an object and then it follows the path and then you actually keyframe it like on what frame you want it to go where. So the frames in between, Blender automatically does it for you. So if you actually, you want to make the camera move. So you want to make you want to edit the rotate properties. So if you set it to 360 at suppose the 100th frame, so by the 100th frame, it will take a complete revolution. So either you can make the object revolve or you can make the camera revolve around the object. So there are two ways to do that. And yes, it is very possible. I have done that.
that's good. That's good. Thank you.
I had a question. So, can you like take multiple 3D models and put them in the same project and then make that whole thing into one giant 3D model?
Yeah. So if you have different projects which you want to import into a single huge file, you can do that. You can make multiple objects in the same file. And like if you have a different project and you just want to import one object from another project, you can also do that.
Cool. Thanks.
Okay.
So,
So
I think this was straight awesome. What we'll
thanks a
do
lot.
is yeah, definitely you recorded this, so that's awesome for people who missed out, which they definitely did. We'll upload it to our Twitter handle, our YouTube and stuff, so that you can get like a few more eyes on this, and definitely feel free to link this in the channel, your slides and the video once we upload it and stuff, so that you know other people can get to
Yeah.
see it.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Thanks for coming.
Awesome. All right. We'll see you next weekend, everyone.